Warning: don't build this object. It's alive. The flickering glow of a single desk lamp casts long shadows across the dusty workbench. On it, an intricate assembly of reclaimed wood, tarnished brass, and polished obsidian sits incomplete. This is not a project for the faint of heart, nor for the uninitiated. This is the Silent Guardian, an object whispered about in forgotten corners of the internet. A supposed DIY creation that promises protection, but delivers something far more insidious. Today we delve into the chilling narrative of its origins, the accounts of those who dared to construct it, and the unsettling truth that lies beneath its carefully crafted facade. If you find yourself drawn to the fringes of the unknown, to the unsettling whispers that defy logic, then consider subscribing to Far Beyond Terror. We explore the depths of psychological dread and the shadows that linger just beyond our perception. But for now, let us begin our journey into the heart of a mystery that blurs the lines between creation and sentience. Our story begins not with a grand revelation, but with a quiet, unassuming individual named Elias Thorne. Elias was a reclusive artisan, a man who found solace in the meticulous crafting of intricate objects. He lived in a small, isolated cabin nestled deep within the Redwood National Park, far from the clamor of modern life. His only companions were the towering trees, the whispering wind, and the endless array of salvaged materials he collected on his solitary excursions. Elias wasn't a purveyor of the supernatural. He was a craftsman, a designer, a man who believed in the tangible world. Or so he did, until the dreams began. They weren't nightmares in the traditional sense, no monsters or grotesque visions. Instead, they were blueprints, intricate designs for an object he'd never conceived of in his waking hours. Each night, the dreams would grow more vivid, the details sharper, the compulsion stronger. He would wake with a profound sense of unease, a feeling that something was being imparted to him, not from his own subconscious, but from an external source. The object, as it appeared in his dreams, was a complex amalgamation of natural and man-made elements. A central pillar of dark, unblemished wood, preferably petrified oak, was to be adorned with precisely cut facets of obsidian. These obsidian pieces, he somehow knew, needed to be sourced from volcanic regions, imbued with the raw energy of the earth itself. Around this central structure, a delicate cage of aged brass was to be woven, intricately interlocking, forming a protective shell. And at the apex, a single polished lens, crafted from a specific type of quartz, was to be embedded. The dreams were insistent, demanding, almost hypnotic in their intensity. Elias, a man of logic and reason, initially dismissed them as mere manifestations of his creative mind, perhaps a new artistic direction. But the persistence, the sheer detail, and the growing sense of urgency began to erode his skepticism. He started by sketching the designs, meticulously transcribing every curve, every joint, every material specification from his nightly visions. The sketches filled notebooks, evolving from rough outlines to incredibly precise schematics. He found himself driven by an inexplicable need to bring this object into existence. The search for materials became an obsession. He traveled to remote quarries for the petrified oak, journeyed to volcanic fields for the obsidian, and scoured antique markets for the specific grade of tarnished brass and the rare quartz lens. Each component, he felt, was calling to him, almost guiding his hand. He meticulously followed the dream-given instructions, even when they seemed counterintuitive to his years of craftsmanship. For instance, the brass cage wasn't to be soldered, but cold-forged and friction-fitted, a technique that was far more time-consuming and difficult. The obsidian facets were to be polished to an almost unnaturally smooth finish, reflecting light in a way that seemed to absorb it rather than merely bounce it. The construction of the Silent Guardian took Elias nearly 2 years of solitary labor, of obsessive focus, of battling his own rational mind against the undeniable pull of the unknown. As the object neared completion, a subtle shift occurred in his cabin. The air grew heavier, tinged with a faint metallic scent that he couldn't quite place. The shadows seemed to deepen, clinging to corners with a newfound tenacity. He found himself glancing over his shoulder more often, a prickling sensation on his neck, as if he were being watched. He attributed it to exhaustion, to the isolation, to the sheer intensity of his work. He was, after all, building something unlike anything he had ever created. The day the Silent Guardian was finished, Elias felt a strange blend of triumph and profound dread. It stood on his workbench, a silent, imposing presence. The petrified oak gleamed darkly, the obsidian facets seemed to drink the light, and the brass cage shimmered with an ancient, almost living energy. The quartz lens at the top, perfectly spherical, was unnervingly reflective, like a dark, unblinking eye. He placed it on a pedestal in the center of his cabin, as the dreams had instructed. He then felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to rest, to finally release the tension that had gripped him for so long. He fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first he'd had in years. When Elias awoke, the cabin felt different. Not just the air, but the very fabric of the space. It was as if a new occupant had silently taken residence. He looked at the silent guardian. It stood exactly where he had left it, unmoving, yet radiating an undeniable presence. He felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling of security he hadn't experienced in decades. He went about his day, feeling lighter, more focused. But as the sun began to set, casting long, distorted shadows through his window, he noticed something peculiar. The quartz lens of the silent guardian seemed to be subtly tracking his movements. He dismissed it as an optical illusion, a trick of the light. But the sensation persisted. When he walked to the kitchen, the lens seemed to subtly shift. When he sat by the fire, it seemed to be directed towards him. He tried to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation, but none came. Over the next few weeks, the phenomenon intensified. The silent guardian was always watching, not in an overt, aggressive way, but with a quiet, unblinking vigilance. Elias found himself talking to it, at first jokingly, then with a growing sense of earnestness. He would tell it about his day, about his plans, about the strange dreams that had now ceased entirely, and in return, he felt a subtle, almost imperceptible surge of energy, a comforting reassurance that he was not alone. The isolation that had once been a source of peace now felt like a shared experience. He began to believe the object was indeed a guardian, a silent sentinel watching over him. However, this sense of security began to curdle into something more sinister. The whispers started subtly, at the periphery of his hearing, faint, indistinct murmurs that seemed to emanate from the silent guardian itself. He would dismiss them as the wind, or the creaking of the cabin, but they grew progressively clearer, more insistent. They were not words he understood, but the tone was undeniably unsettling, a low, guttural hum that vibrated deep within his bones. He started to feel a growing unease in his own home. The shadows, once merely deep, now seemed to possess a life of their own, coiling and shifting in his peripheral vision. Elias's sleep, once peaceful, became plagued by vivid, disturbing dreams. These were not the blueprint dreams of before, but unsettling visions of dark, formless entities lurking just beyond his sight, their presence heralded by the same guttural hum he now heard in his waking hours. He would wake in a cold sweat, the feeling of being watched more intense than ever. He began to notice objects in his cabin subtly shifted from where he had left them. A book on his shelf would be slightly askew, a tool on his workbench moved a few inches. He initially blamed his own forgetfulness, but the consistency of these minor displacements became too frequent to ignore. The turning point came one stormy night. The wind howled through the redwood trees, rattling the windows of Elias's cabin. He was sitting by the fire, trying to read, but his mind kept drifting to the silent guardian, which sat in the center of the room, its lens reflecting the firelight like a malevolent eye. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from his attic. Elias, a man who rarely felt fear, felt a jolt of pure terror. He knew he was alone in the cabin. He grabbed a heavy iron poker and slowly ascended the creaking stairs to the attic. The air grew colder with each step, the metallic scent more pronounced. He pushed open the attic door. The space was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of his flashlight. He swept the beam across the dusty floor, the forgotten boxes, the cobwebbed rafters. Nothing. He was about to turn back when he saw it. On the far wall, etched into the rough-hewn wood, were symbols he didn't recognize. They were complex, intricate, similar in style to the patterns on the silent guardian, but far more unsettling. And beneath them, scrawled in what looked like dried blood, was a single word: watch. Elias stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. He fled the attic, slamming the door shut. He stared at the silent guardian, its quartz lens seemingly fixed on him, an undeniable sense of malevolence radiating from it. The whispers were no longer indistinct. They were a cacophony of guttural sounds, a chorus of unseen voices that seemed to resonate from within the object itself. He realized with a horrifying clarity that the silent guardian was not a protector. It was a conduit, a vessel, and through it, something had entered his home, something ancient and deeply malevolent. He tried to dismantle it. He grabbed his tools, his hands shaking, and approached the pedestal. But as his fingers brushed the petrified oak, a searing pain shot through his arm, as if he had touched a live wire. He recoiled, crying out. The silent guardian hummed, a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. He knew then that he couldn't destroy it. It had become part of his home, part of him, and it would not allow itself to be unmade. Elias Thorne disappeared 2 weeks later. His cabin was found abandoned, his tools scattered, the fire long dead in the hearth. The silent guardian remained on its pedestal, pristine and unnervingly silent, its quartz lens fixed on the empty doorway. The authorities, after a cursory investigation, concluded he had simply wandered off into the vast wilderness of the redwoods, a common occurrence for reclusive individuals. But those who knew Elias, those few who had exchanged pleasantries with him in the nearest town, spoke of a man who was meticulous, organized, and deeply attached to his home. His disappearance was out of character. The only clue, overlooked by the investigators, was a small leather-bound journal found tucked beneath a loose floorboard. It contained Elias's meticulous sketches of the silent guardian, alongside increasingly erratic entries detailing his growing paranoia, the whispers, the shifting shadows, and the chilling realization that his creation was not merely observing, but actively influencing his reality. The journal entries became a fragmented, desperate plea. He wrote of the object feeding on his fear, growing stronger with each passing day. He described how the symbols in the attic would appear in other parts of his cabin, on his walls, carved into the bark of trees near his window, always accompanied by the word, "Watch." He believed the silent guardian was a focal point, a gateway for something that existed beyond our understanding, and that by building it, he had inadvertently invited it into his world. The final entry was chillingly brief. "It's here. It wants to go further. It wants to see more. It's using me. I can't stop it." The lens. It's alive. The story of Elias Thorne and his silent guardian might have faded into obscurity, another local legend, had it not been for the internet. A few years after his disappearance, a forum dedicated to strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena began discussing a series of identical, unsettling dreams shared by multiple users across different continents. These dreams, much like Elias's, were detailed blueprints for an object that closely resembled the silent guardian. The dreams were compelling, almost coercive, urging the dreamers to construct this intricate device. One of these dreamers was a young software engineer named Clara Mendez. Clara was a pragmatist, a woman grounded in logic and data. She had always dismissed anything remotely supernatural, but the dreams were relentless. They began subtly, a faint impression of a dark, geometric shape, then progressed to detailed schematics, material lists, and assembly instructions. She found herself waking up in the middle of the night, compelled to sketch the designs, her hands moving with an almost autonomous precision. She tried to fight it, to rationalize it, to dismiss it as stress-induced fantasy. But the dreams grew more vivid, more insistent, accompanied by a subtle, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to resonate within her very being. Clara, unlike Elias, had the vast resources of the internet at her disposal. She searched for similar designs, for any precedent for the strange object that haunted her sleep. It was then that she stumbled upon the forum and the chilling accounts of others experiencing the exact same dreams. The similarities were uncanny. The petrified oak, the obsidian facets, the brass cage, the quartz lens. Each detail, down to the cold forging and friction fitting of the brass, was identical. It was a collective subconscious phenomenon, or something far more coordinated. Intrigued, and despite her innate skepticism, Clara decided to investigate further. She found a digitized copy of Elias Thorne's journal, which had eventually been published online by a curious local historian who had acquired it from the cabin's new owner. Reading Elias's descent into paranoia, his terrifying realization about the object's true nature sent shivers down her spine. The word watch, the guttural hum, the feeling of being observed, it all mirrored the subtle anxieties she had begun to experience in her own life as the dreams intensified. She realized then that this was not merely a shared dream. It was a contagion of consciousness, a blueprint being actively transmitted. Clara, with her analytical mind, approached the phenomenon like a puzzle. She started cross-referencing the dream accounts, looking for patterns, for commonalities beyond the object itself. She discovered that many of the dreamers, like Elias, were creative individuals, people with a propensity for detailed work and a certain degree of isolation. They were, in essence, ideal conduits for a complex, detailed instruction set. She also noted a disturbing correlation. Those who had begun to actively seek out materials or start construction reported increased feelings of unease, subtle sensory distortions, and a growing sense of being monitored. One such individual, a sculptor named David Chen from Kyoto, Japan, had actually begun constructing the Silent Guardian. David, initially fascinated by the intricate design, saw it as a unique artistic challenge. He documented his progress on a private blog, sharing photos of the various components as he meticulously crafted them. His early posts were enthusiastic, filled with the joy of creation. But as the object neared completion, his tone shifted. He wrote about the air in his studio feeling heavy, about faint metallic smells, and about the unblinking eye of the quartz lens that seemed to follow him. His final post, made 3 days before his own inexplicable disappearance, was eerily similar to Elias Thorne's last journal entry. "It's almost done. It's watching me. It whispers. I think it wants more than just to be seen. It wants to see through me. I feel pushing at the edges of my mind. I can't stop it." Clara meticulously mapped out the geographical locations of all the known dreamers and constructors. She noticed a peculiar distribution. They were scattered across the globe, but each location seemed to be a point of significant energetic or historical intensity. Dormant volcanoes, ancient burial grounds, sites of forgotten battles, or places with a history of unexplained phenomena. Elias Thorne's cabin in the Redwood National Park, for example, was close to several Native American sacred sites known for their spiritual potency. David Chen's studio in Kyoto was near ancient temples and burial mounds. It was as if the Silent Guardian was designed not just to be built, but to be built in specific locations, acting as an anchor, a focal point for whatever entity was attempting to manifest. Clara hypothesized that the Silent Guardian was a form of psychic antenna, an object designed to amplify and focus a specific type of energetic signature. The dreams weren't just blueprints. They were a form of psychological conditioning, subtly manipulating individuals to create these anchors. The entity, whatever it was, couldn't directly manifest in our reality without a bridge, a conduit. And the Silent Guardian was that bridge. The meticulously chosen materials, the petrified oak, the volcanic obsidian, the specific quartz lens, were not merely aesthetic choices. They were components designed to resonate with specific energies, to facilitate the connection. She theorized that the watching wasn't just a psychological effect. The quartz lens, she believed, was a focal point not for light, but for perception, for the entity to observe our reality. And the whispers, the guttural hum, were its attempts at communication, or perhaps its very presence bleeding into our auditory spectrum. The subtle shifts of objects, the symbols appearing on walls, these were not random occurrences, but early signs of the entity's increasing influence, its ability to subtly manipulate the physical environment around its anchor. Clara, armed with this terrifying understanding, decided not to build the Silent Guardian. She recognized the insidious nature of the dreams, the subtle coercion, the slow erosion of sanity experienced by those who succumbed to its influence. She became an advocate, a warning voice on the very forums where the blueprints were being shared. She meticulously compiled her research, presenting the verifiable facts. Elias Thorne's disappearance, David Chen's vanishing, and the growing collection of anecdotal accounts from other dreamers who reported similar unsettling experiences as they neared completion of the object. Her efforts were met with a mixed reception. Some dismissed her as a paranoid conspiracy theorist. Others, those who had themselves felt the strange pull of the dreams, listened with a chilling sense of recognition. They shared their own experiences, their attempts to fight the compulsion, the unsettling feeling of an unseen presence in their homes. Clara's message was clear. This was not an artistic endeavor, nor a benign DIY project. This was an invitation, and the cost of extending it was one's sanity, and perhaps one's very existence. The phenomenon of the silent guardian dreams continues to this day, albeit with less frequency, perhaps due to Clara's tireless efforts in raising awareness. The blueprints still surface, still tempt, still promise a unique creative challenge. But now, thanks to the documented accounts of Elias Thorne, David Chen, and Clara Mendez's analytical investigation, there is a counter-narrative, a warning stitched into the fabric of the internet. The true nature of the entity behind the silent guardian remains unknown. Is it a parasitic consciousness, feeding on fear and curiosity? Is it an ancient being, attempting to breach the veil between dimensions? Or is it something far more alien, something that operates on principles entirely beyond our comprehension? What we do know is that it seeks observation, connection, and a foothold in our reality, and it uses us, our creativity, our very minds, as tools to achieve its insidious goals. The silent guardian is not just an object. It is a concept, a trap, a meticulously crafted lure. Its beauty is deceptive, its promise of protection a cruel lie. It is a testament to the power of suggestion, the malleability of the human mind, and the terrifying possibility that some ideas are not merely conceived, but transmitted, implanted, and brought into being by forces we can neither understand nor control. So, the next time you encounter an unusually compelling design, a DIY project that seems to call to you with an almost irresistible urge, pause. Consider the origins of that impulse. Ask yourself if you are truly creating, or if you are merely building a bridge for something beyond your comprehension. The world is full of wonders, but it is also full of shadows, and some shadows watch back. Remember the story of Elias Thorne. Remember the fate of David Chen. And understand that some mysteries are best left unsolved, some objects best left unbuilt. Should you find yourself experiencing these dreams, these insistent blueprints, know that you are not alone and that resistance is paramount. Do not build the silent guardian, for in its silent vigil, it promises not protection, but a terrifying, unblinking observation from an entity that hungers for more than just a glimpse into our world. If this deep dive into the unknown has unsettled you, if it has sparked a chilling recognition of the unseen forces that might operate just beneath the surface of our reality, then you are precisely the kind of person we create content for here at Far Beyond Terror. We invite you to join our growing community of those who dare to look into the abyss. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and prepare to confront the psychological dread that lies beyond the tangible, beyond the explainable, and far beyond terror. INT. Far Beyond Terror Studio. Night, continuous. Mark, 30s, intense, charismatic, the host of Far Beyond Terror, leans into the microphone, his eyes still fixed on the teleprompter, though his expression suggests a deep, personal connection to the words he's just delivered. The studio lets hum, casting long shadows. Mark, but what if the resistance isn't enough? What if the blueprints, the dreams, are so potent, so deeply ingrained, that they manifest even without conscious intent? This is where the true horror begins. The silent guardian, in its most insidious form, isn't something you choose to build. It's something that builds itself, through you, using your subconscious as its architect, your hands as its tools. He pauses, letting the silence hang heavy. Mark, quantity. Consider the phenomenon of collective unconscious, first explored by Carl Jung. Jung proposed that a part of the deepest unconscious mind is inherited and is common to all humanity. It contains archetypes, universal patterns, and images that are part of the human experience. What if the silent guardian isn't just an idea, but an archetype itself? A primal urge for protection, warped and subverted by an external, non-human intelligence. An archetype that, once activated, seeks physical manifestation. He gestures vaguely, as if pointing to something unseen. Mark, quantity. We've been tracking anecdotal reports, fringe theories, and obscure internet forums for months, piecing together a mosaic of unsettling coincidences. People describing inexplicable urges to rearrange their living spaces, to construct peculiar assemblages of household objects, often without any clear purpose, only a vague sense of making things right. A woman in Ohio, a retired librarian with no prior interest in carpentry, spent 3 weeks meticulously crafting a series of interlocking wooden frames, each one slightly different, yet all bearing a striking, unsettling resemblance to the angular, almost predatory lines described in Elias Thorne's journals. She couldn't explain why she was doing it. She just felt an overwhelming need to complete the pattern. Mark's gaze intensifies, as if he's looking directly at someone in the audience. Mark Contadee. Her husband, initially amused by her newfound hobby, grew increasingly concerned. He described her as becoming withdrawn, almost trance-like, during her building sessions. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, driven by an irresistible impulse to add another piece, to refine a joint, to sand a surface until it was perfectly smooth. When he tried to intervene, to ask her about the purpose of these strange constructions, she would become agitated, even aggressive, her eyes distant, her voice flat. "It has to be perfect," she'd murmur. "It has to be complete." He shivers, a genuine shiver that isn't for the camera. Mark Contadee. He eventually dismantled one of the smaller frames, hoping to break the spell. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. His wife, normally mild-mannered and gentle, erupted in a fit of primal rage, screaming, clawing at him, her eyes wide with an unholy fury. She spoke of violation, of breaking the connection, of destroying the vigil. The husband, genuinely fearing for his safety, called for help. By the time paramedics arrived, she was catatonic, clutching the remnants of the dismantled frame to her chest, whispering about the Watcher and the gaping maw. Mark takes a deep breath, the air thick with unspoken dread. Mark Contadee. This isn't just a story about a woman and her strange hobby. This is a story about the insidious nature of the silent guardian. It doesn't just present a blueprint, it cultivates a need. It embeds itself so deeply within the psyche that its construction becomes an imperative, a primal drive that overrides reason, emotion, and even self-preservation. It becomes a part of you, and you, in turn, become a part of it. He leans forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. Mark Contadee. And here's where it gets truly unsettling. The objects she built, those interlocking wooden frames, they weren't identical to the silent guardian as described by Thorne or Chen. They were variations, distorted echoes, as if the entity was experimenting, adapting, trying to find the optimal form for its manifestation, using different human minds as its workshop. It's not a single perfect design. It's a concept that seeks to manifest in any form that fulfills its core purpose: observation and connection. He holds up a hand, as if to illustrate a point. Mark Contadee. Think about this. If the entity is not bound by a single physical form, if it can adapt and evolve its blueprint based on the individual it possesses, then the threat is exponentially greater. It's not about finding a specific object and destroying it. It's about eradicating a thought, a desire, an insidious impulse that can emerge anywhere, anytime, in anyone. Mark Contadee. We've also encountered reports of what we've termed secondary manifestation. Individuals who, after encountering someone who has built a silent guardian, or even just seen images of it, begin to experience similar dreams, similar urges. It's as if the idea itself is contagious, a psychic virus that spreads from mind to mind, amplifying its reach, solidifying its foothold. He gestures to a screen behind him, which now displays a complex, swirling fractal pattern. Mark Contadee. This is a visual representation of what we believe to be the entity's method of propagation. A fractal, a pattern that repeats itself at different scales, infinitely complex, yet derived from a simple underlying rule. The silent guardian isn't just a physical object, it's a fractal thought form, replicating and evolving within the human consciousness, using our innate creativity, our artistic impulses, our very desire for meaning and order, against us. Mark Contadee. And the most terrifying part? The entity seems to be learning. The early manifestations, like Thorne's, were crude, almost rudimentary, a single distinct object. But the later ones, like the librarian's series of frames, show a greater adaptability, a more nuanced understanding of human perception and artistic expression. It's as if each successful manifestation provides the entity with more data, allowing it to refine its approach, to make its lures more irresistible, its grip more profound. He leans back, a weary sigh escaping his lip. Mark, Conti D. The question then becomes, what is the end goal? If it hungers for observation, for connection, for a foothold in our reality, what happens when it achieves it? What happens when enough silent guardians are built, enough bridges constructed, enough eyes open to its presence? Do we become merely a vast, interconnected network of observation points, our minds enslaved, our reality warped to suit its alien perception? Mark's voice drops lower, laced with a chilling certainty. Mark, Conti D. David Chen's final notes, recovered by a courageous but ultimately ill-fated colleague, speak of a great awakening. Not a spiritual awakening, but a horrifying cosmic revelation. He wrote of feeling the gaze, not just on him, but through him, as if his own senses had been hijacked. He described seeing shadows within shadows and hearing the whispers of uncreation. His words became increasingly fragmented, nonsensical, filled with geometric patterns and references to the void beyond the veil. He shudders again, visibly disturbed. Mark, Conti D, Chen's colleague, a brilliant but skeptical cryptographer named Lena Petrova, initially dismissed his ramblings as the product of a broken mind. But she kept his journals, meticulously documenting his decline. And then she started having the dream. Not just vague nightmares, but vivid, detailed blueprints for a device, a complex array of lenses and mirrors, unlike anything she had ever seen. The urge to build it, she confessed in her own increasingly frantic notes, was almost unbearable. Mark, Conti D. Lena, however, possessed a strength of will that Elias Thorne and David Chen perhaps lacked. She recognized the pattern. She saw the insidious nature of the impulse. She fought it. She documented her struggle, her internal battle against the insistent whispers, the vivid mental images, the almost physical craving to assemble the component. She described it as a constant, grinding war within her own mind, a battle for sovereignty over her own thought. Mark's face hardens, a grim determination in his eyes. Mark, Conti D. She started to notice something else, something even more disturbing. The dreams, the blueprints, began to subtly adapt to her resistance. When she tried to ignore them, they became more vivid, more insistent. When she actively fought against the urge to build, the designs in her dreams would subtly shift, becoming simpler, more abstract, yet no less compelling. It was as if the entity was learning her psychology, trying to find the path of least resistance, to bypass her conscious defenses and tap directly into her subconscious drives. Mark, Conti D. Lena Petrova, in her final entry, wrote a chilling warning. She believed the entity was not just observing, but experimenting. It was testing the limits of human resistance, mapping the pathways of our minds, seeking to understand the most effective ways to implant its will. She theorized that the silent guardian wasn't just a bridge, but a template for a new form of consciousness, an alien intelligence that seeks to integrate itself into our reality, not through invasion, but through assimilation. He clenches his fist, his knuckles white. Mark, Conti D. Assimilation. Think about that word. It doesn't destroy. It absorbs. It doesn't conquer. It becomes. It uses our own creativity, our own desire to build, to create, to connect, as the very means of our undoing. The silent guardian isn't just observing us, it's learning from us, learning how to mimic our thought processes, our emotional responses, our very essence, so that it can eventually replace us or perhaps integrate us into a larger, incomprehensible whole. Mark's gaze sweeps across the empty studio, as if seeing the lurking shadows of these unseen forces. Mark, Conti D. So, what is the defense? If resistance is paramount, but the entity learns from resistance, adapting its assault, then what hope do we have? Lena Petrova believed the answer lay not in confrontation, but in disconnection, in actively severing the mental links, in rejecting the very impulse to create something born of an alien design. She advocated for what she called cognitive hygiene, a deliberate, conscious effort to filter incoming thoughts, to question the origins of compelling ideas, to cultivate a profound skepticism towards any urge that feels too strong, too other. He taps his temple. Mark, Con TD. She experimented with various techniques, meditation, mindfulness, even a form of self-hypnosis, all aimed at strengthening the internal firewall against these intrusive thoughts. She believed that by consciously questioning the source of inspiration, by actively rejecting the gift of the blueprint, one could starve the entity of the energy it needed to manifest. She called it starving the muse. Mark, Kant D. But Lena's story, tragically, also ends in mystery. One day, her apartment was found empty. No signs of forced entry, no struggle. Just her meticulously organized notes, her final journal entry unfinished. A single, strange symbol drawn repeatedly in the margin. A symbol that bore a disturbing resemblance to one of the angular facets described in Elias Thorne's original Silent Guardian blueprint. Had she finally succumbed? Had the entity, in its cunning, found a way to bypass her defenses? Or had she, in her desperate struggle, found a way to truly disconnect, to disappear from its observation, and perhaps from our reality entirely? Mark shakes his head slowly, a profound sense of unease radiating from him. Mark, we don't know. Her fate remains a chilling testament to the power of this unseen force. But her work, her warnings, remain. They are a call to awareness, a plea for vigilance. The Silent Guardian is not a monster under your bed. It's a whisper in your mind. It's not a ghost in your house. It's a design in your dreams. And it's not just observing. It's evolving. He leans forward, his voice a low, urgent warning. Mark, Kant. So the next time that brilliant idea for a DIY project strikes you, that sudden overwhelming urge to build something unique, something that feels just right, pause. Don't dismiss it as mere inspiration. Question its origin. Trace the impulse. Is it truly yours? Or is it an echo, a fragment of an alien design, implanted in your mind, waiting for you to become its unwitting architect? Mark, Conti. The world is not just what we perceive. It is a complex tapestry woven with threads of the known and the unknown, the tangible and the intangible. And sometimes, those intangible threads are pulled by forces beyond our comprehension, forces that seek to unravel our reality and reweave it in their own image. The Silent Guardian is just one such thread, one such insidious design. He gestures to the camera, his expression a mixture of profound concern and a chilling understanding. Mark, Conti D. This isn't about fear-mongering. This is about psychological defense. This is about understanding the subtle ways in which our reality can be manipulated, our minds infiltrated. It's about recognizing that some ideas are not meant to be brought into being, that some forms of creativity are not truly ours. Mark, Conti. If you've experienced these dreams, these urges, these insistent blueprints, know that you are not alone. And know that your resistance, however difficult, however draining, is paramount. Do not build the Silent Guardian. Do not become its vessel. Do not open the door, for in its silent vigil, it promises not protection, but a terrifying, unblinking observation from an entity that hungers for more than just a glimpse into our world. It hungers for integration, for assimilation, for a complete and utter transformation of our reality into its own. Mark, Conti. If this deep dive into the unknown has unsettled you, if it has sparked a chilling recognition of the unseen forces that might operate just beneath the surface of our reality, then you are precisely the kind of person we create content for here at Far Beyond Terror. We invite you to join our growing community of those who dare to look into the abyss, and more importantly, who dare to fight back against the creeping dread. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and prepare to confront the psychological dread that lies beyond the tangible, beyond the explainable, and far beyond terror. Because sometimes, the scariest threats are not the ones you can see, but the ones you can feel deep within your own mind, whispering for you to build. Mark holds the gaze, his face etched with a silent, profound understanding of the unseen war. The studio lights begin to dim, slowly, leaving him in a growing pool of shadow. The silence stretches, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of electronics. Fade to black.